в стратегии приоритета инновационного развития. Меня зовут Виталий Сараев, я являюсь
My name is Vitaly Saraev. I'm head of Innopraktika, and prior to starting the introduction of our speakers, let me say that with us are Vladimir Andreev, acting Deputy General Director of Russian Railways, Mr. Knyagin, Vice Governor of St. Petersburg. Nazarov Vladimir will be with us online. Mr. Ninikov from Rosnano, Alexander Liberov from Siemens in Russia, and Anton Tubikin from Sinaro Transport Machines, STM Trade House. Colleagues, let me say a few words about the very objective of our presentation, of our meeting. In the last 10 years, technologically, Russian railways did not develop very much. Actually, it made some breakthroughs, and certain changes were introduced. We, in the practice, along with the Russian railways, made an foresight until 2050. You have to be brave in order to look 30 years ahead, but this bravery is totally needed. Railways, that's totally strategic piece of infrastructure, and you have to build certain technological advances right now. The company is ready for that. Moreover, as we saw at the strategic session with the top management of the Russian railways, the company is prepared to be the customer of innovations, but also is prepared to make an input into innovations development. You have to look for partners and coinciding interests. This is what our discussion will be dedicated to. We'll start with Mr. Andreev's keynote speech. He will speak about the results and takeaways of foresight, what the Russian ways has to expect in the upcoming decades, and what requirements it sets for its partners. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Dear guests of our roundtable, the ability to look into the future and to set the appropriate goals in the changing world has become a must. Russian railways has to find solutions to introduce such technologies and innovations which would satisfy or even anticipate the aspirations of the customers, helping to benefit from that. Therefore, we have built a focused and planning system, setting priorities in terms of introducing innovations. Foresight and benchmarking are used as tools for designing and developing future vectors of the development. It's been enshrined in the strategic documents of the company. Planning and implementation of the activities, as well as the monitoring of the implementation, also is being done, proceeding from the results achieved. Such a system allows us to look into the future and to develop a plan of step-by-step achieving these goals. These steps may be 5 years long and even 1 year long. And we can keep track of making sure that every step is made in the right direction. That's a comprehensive system of innovative development of the Russian railways until 2025. The program bears in mind the priorities which are reflected in the national projects, programs, plans, and agreements, and also in the main strategic and program documents of the company. It rests on the benchmarking results. Annually, we assess the technological development level of the company against the biggest railway companies of the world. We prioritize most important new practices and technologies and technical solutions appropriate for the Russian railways. We're also implementing innovative projects of the sovereign and global level. For instance, unmanned steering system for Lastочка trains, development of the Moscow Central diameters, building of high-speed lines from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Such projects being implemented attest to the high level of technological development of the railway systems in Russia, and it is an illustrative example of the strategy we have developed for the railways until 2030. Today, one of the key tools for shaping the future is foresight. Russian Railways joint stock company is one of the EU companies which did such a foresight analysis looking 30 years ahead. Our colleagues from Innopraktika, Moscow State University and Center for Strategic Development helped us to assess the main macro trends and the factors which determine them that may influence the development of the transport in future. Decarbonization, emergence of new means of transportation, stricter climate requirements will result in the fall in the crude prices and fossil fuels, and therefore the companies will have to focus on the innovative technologies. This is something being discussed and debated at different roundtables. New centers of gravity would emerge. Consumption and localization centers would change. The competition among different means of transportation, including the new ones, would intensify. Digitalization of the economy and customization of goods and services, that's another trend, thus making these tools popping up and leading to the monopolization of the monopolies in the market, measures of the monopolies in the market. Urbanization, that's another factor. Aging of the population. People will aspire to live in cities, and therefore the high-speed communication between the cities will rise in popularity. Therefore, the urban transportation systems will change. These are just a few of the trends which we have discussed over the last 6 months with the leading experts. Also, we have determined for us the global challenges that railway system faces. For instance, the rise of major cities, which changes the demand for passenger and cargo transportation. Localization until 2030 sadly will impact the implementation of innovative technologies. Today, according to the experts, there are focus of active penetration of the breakthrough technologies with influence on the technologies. 3D printing, for instance, by 2030 may result in the change in the main production systems. Redox systems may lead to phasing out of the combustion engines, and therefore the airborne and electric vehicles will become more popular. Thermal synthesis after 2050 may result in the fall in the prices of green hydrogen and electric power. The mankind would abandon fossil fuels, oil and coal as the power sources. Other breakthrough technologies would emerge, therefore resulting in the new requirements for the rolling stock and transportation. Due to stricter, more stringent environmental rules, we'll see the rise in the competition among different means of transportation, thus promoting innovative technologies. Implementation of innovative green technologies, technological development of smart system integration of the urban transportation systems, and the change in the business models of the logistics companies were noted. Therefore, railway system faces a fork in the road as far as the technologies, especially the digital ones, and the conditions under which we have to work are changing with the rising speed. We have to make the appropriate choice, setting priorities in order to strengthen our competitive edges against other means of transportation. One of such technological areas which are relevant for the Russian railways is automation and robotization of the transportation. Automation and digitalization in the light of artificial intelligence will give us another wave of better productivity, labor productivity, and probably will leave more than 50% of jobs unemployed, thus requiring the workforce to get retrained. Another fork in the road for the Russian railways could be observed by 2050, whether it can become a commercial company, thus improving its productivity and operational efficiency, or the company will focus on performing public infrastructural and social objectives. No less important thing for the company is about seamless logistics transportation, which will promote the propagation of the digital platforms that would capture the market. Such a platform and ownership of it will become the key competitive edge for the transportation logistics companies, which becomes one more fork in the road for us until 2050. Whether we can own such an aggregator or we can become a permanent service provider for such an aggregator. Another key trend for the development of the rolling stock under the experts, bearing in mind more stringent environmental rules until 2050, will be low-carbon technologies, including the use of alternative power sources and green high-tech materials used to produce rolling stock. Along with the manufacturers will face a choice whether to implement green technologies and high-tech technologies, meeting the Russian railways requirements, thus cutting the service life costs. Until 2050, the development of the energy sector will be related to decarbonization, decentralization, and digitalization. For the railway system, that would be about setting up industrial and commercial micro-hybrids, implementation of smart power systems, massive spreading of new technologies, and setting up new systems for the railway. Another fork in the road that we can face until 2050, that would be about setting our own power generation capacities and assets, upgrading the existing energy complex, where we can take advantage of the power generated by third-party providers. Russian Railways is participating in the urban agglomerations. Until 2050, it would be associated with the development of the transport systems, which would be accompanied by setting up multifunction, multimodal hubs, thus expediting the development of high-tech companies and setting up end-to-end or door-to-door services. Another fork in the road for the Russian railways would be about focusing on the railway transportation, or to compensate the lost revenue, we can focus on the logistics services. Or even going beyond the logistics services at the moment, we are facing a choice. Which of the ways to take? Our choice depends on where our partners are moving, the state regulators, manufacturers, science, private business. Dear participants in this roundtable, what altogether we can do in order to come to the common denominator? In my understanding, this is something that we have to discuss. So thank you so much, Vitaly. Thank you so much, Mr. Andreev. Tell me, please, what can you suggest? You spoke about trends, about challenges, about forks in the road. What partnership you can offer? Well, look, in order to develop, we have to develop as fast as possible. We have to move forward, but not looking back, just like we are, for instance, discussing the batteries, hydrogen, which is better, which is more efficient. What has to be done? Everything has to be done. Gas has to be used in the railways systems. We don't have to be afraid of batteries. We don't have to be afraid of hydrogen. We have to do that now, because tomorrow In 2050, probably this is something we will no longer need. In 2050, bear in mind that we are, well, still stuck in steam engines. This is our lingua, corporate lingua. Will not move and will be left with the present. Let's have a look at what has changed over the past years. We're discussing whether it is cheap or expensive to buy a computer. Can you remember IBM 086? Can we, for instance, solve the problems which we're facing now? Suddenly, they are no longer outdated. They are outdated. Why we are speaking about robotization and automation of everything? We understand the pace of changes, the scope of data doesn't allow a man to make drawings manually. Now we have to look at this seamless software, the ones which will give us digital stations, robots which will replace people and that will do some routine operations in the harsh climate conditions. Like that? We're expecting that. And we are quite reactive rather than proactive. Once you look at the exhibition, and for instance, TMK made an interesting offer, but we would like to see that on our tracks, and we have to understand whether we're moving in the right direction. Do we manage to update our external infrastructure of Rosatom, of Gazprom, of all our partners? In essence, that's a very big cluster of science, machinery, which will act as the main driver. And for instance, if we opt for hydrogen, we have to think about logistics, about production, about transportation, subsequent recycling. That would require lots of technologies. So we can actually do some calculations, and once we do that manually, probably we'll just not manage to implement that on time. Let's proceed with our speakers. Vladimir, you are the Vice Governor of St. Petersburg, which has a huge scientific potential. I have two questions to you. First of all, out of the trends and tendencies which were highlighted by Mr. Andreev, which one are most relevant? Which ones would influence the development of St. Petersburg in the area of transportation? Do you have any mutual interest with the Russian railways and railway system in general?
Well, thank you, colleagues, for the invitation. Indeed, Russian Railways is one of the bigger players, including in the innovative in the market of innovations of the Russian Federation, and it is also a significant player in the European market as well, because the investment into technologies is quite sizable. And in this regard, it is important for us to cooperate with the leaders. If you want to be a leader, you need to be associated with the leaders. And 3 points here to make. First, this is regarding foresight and forecasts. Of course, the last 18 months proved that the degree of uncertainty is quite high, and more or less we are facing now very acute problems. With the available resources, we were not able to really tackle such problems and challenges. We can mitigate those, but not eliminate those. What we have in terms of the climate change and those climate changes look like some local challenges, but we would be facing this growing uncertainty. And we need to try to handle those challenges in terms of either making up reserves, and those are quite sizable reserves, or we may somehow update our foresight to provide a flexible response to the uncertainty. This is not a destructive dilemma. It's like mutually excluding options, but it is probably a complementing one. In St. Petersburg, we launched some of the projects to modernize our forecasting. Forecasting is there. There's road mapping, and there is foresight as a method of somehow more or less formalizing our vision for a time horizon which is available in bits and pieces and small pixels and granular details. In this sense, I would support Vladimir that if you would go on with the deployment of such tools as foresight in your corporation, you will have to indeed engage your vendors, your shippers, and ourselves in St. Petersburg as a big city. So the future is about really putting pieces of the puzzle together, and your task as analysts would be really to provide us with the full picture and a time horizon. And this is something that we have launched so far, and we have now 3 tasks in mind. First, to really sharply increase the functionality, because this gap between the overall vision and the action is still there, and sometimes we can imagine what is going to happen in say 2050. But that's okay. But what are we going to do and need to do in the next 5 to 10 years? And there we need to have some functionality of our forecasting. Second project is to reduce the costs. If we do if it takes like a year to come up with a foresight, it is bad because much would change, and this cost and flexibility really must be agile. And third is what is important to us. It is our ability to react to some even weak signals. A pandemic was really put into our strategy, and that was one of the risks that we were supposed to get ready for. But thank God, and we were more or less ready with our modular platforms of the vaccines. But look at the countries that actually were ready for that. Only 4 countries of the world were ready to come up with the vaccines. Other countries simply did not have any, prior research into that. So we need to really somehow be able to see those weak signals, something that is happening with hydrogen, for example, right now. To us, this is quite distant future, like 10 years. But look, we need to be looking at the investment. We do see what companies are doing. We do feel where business is going. It is not like the traditional methods of producing hydrogen. It's not like pyrolysis or hydrolysis. It is all about catalysts now, and the volume of investment is very significant. So the devil is out of the box, and we need to really react to such a signal. And then it would be for chemists to do something. We now have restored quite strong chemical faculties in our Russian universities, and now we have a bold team of chemical engineers who are doing some good research, and actually they come from all over the world to really research into what would be the future of chemistry. Now, how to read those foresights? We have the foresight, the analyst provided us with the foresight, and that's it for him. There is like a foresight and prediction for 2050. But how do you read that? There's a place for risk management. If Europeans really introduce that carbon tax as of 2026, then we know that Deutsche Bank really received a claim not for investing into projects with a carbon imprint, but for the fact that this is a public company that really, when generating and producing its statements, made a mistake about the size of the carbon imprint and trace. And really, it's kind of like the tax is still not there, but the implications and consequences we already have. Now, there was some project in Russia to precisely measure the carbon emissions. Not any estimates, but taking actual operational data, and you do see some difference. The most recent publication in Nature on cities, you have estimates of emissions, and there's a difference between the estimates and the actuals. And we need to decide what to do with that. And what about the public companies? They face the same challenge. And of course, you need to integrate the results of foresight into the risk management systems of companies. Who and how is taking record of that? I mean, nothing is going on. I mean, we don't have any of this carbon regulation yet in the world. But the claims and action that are taken in the U.S. courts, in the U.S. courts of states. When this or that town, if there's a change in the shoreline and the waters are rising, then there are claims and action taken against the companies in that town for their environmental responsibility. There have not been any cases of fines or anything like that, sanctions taken against those companies. But look, a town can really request the documents to compare the projections and the actuals of the company for those risks. And the risks are really high. Risks are international. And this is something that we need to be mindful. And also we need to have a body and authority to decide. And there are new trends, and this is an example of really putting up some teams that like think tanks, but new think tanks, not based on any early research capacity. And we have those teams that are ready to work. And this some new ideas are born within the new departments in various companies. And by the way, all those old research institutions and centers were driven by some new, at that time, ideas. Now we are trying to do the same, but of course you need to be thinking about resources. I mean, the old centers can lobby for their interests, and you need to launch some new ideas in this environment. The flexibility of technological systems. As a matter of fact, if we cannot prevent some of the events, and this is important for Russian railways indeed, because investments are quite sizable. Well, we also know about the idea of the president to more or less have a complete logistical chain to use the ports of the Baltic Sea, St. Petersburg, and the nearby ports. And the St. Petersburg is going to be this huge agglomeration of services, and all of that going all the way to the far east of the country. And this would produce like hundreds of billions of investment, or trillions of investment. This is a third of the announced investment projects in Russia, which means that we need to somehow try to decide how to invest in such projects. So what is going to happen with coal? Many people already kind of like stop using coals, and transportation costs for coal would be growing. So coal is moving either sometimes to Europe and then to Asia. But how to be agile there, how to provide an agile solution to the transportation of such mineral resources. And in terms of the foresight, we have the three levels, the risk management, and most probably we are going to move towards not the carbon yards. That would be okay with us because Russia has ample space for those. But also, if you take the cities, where to really kind of like find space for such carbon yards, if you like. And now, if we want to use solar power, where we are going to put those solar panels, and how many roofs do we need for those panels? If we are going to use the wind power, then we need to have the wind generators somehow placed here and there. If you get the green ammonia, and we have even a small plant for that to take about 30,000 hectares. And if you take electrical cars, what would be the consumption of electricity at the city level? And we are only so far moving towards trying to come up with the estimates. However, we need to do that. And last thing, frankly speaking, I do not know whether we are going to see some technological disruption, more or less, and we expected that to happen like 10 or 15 years ago with all those discussions of the composite materials, and people thought that really that would be the next revolution. But Boeing actually was not really happy about that, and so far the composite materials have not replaced metals, so this is some additive production. Now, of course, if we're going to kind of like see more smaller parts in engines, then such composite materials would be more important. What could be kind of like a change trigger there? Most probably this is about the sources of energy and the change in the sources of energy. And this is the point which really should be paid a lot of attention to. And that's the material science is going there, and the design principles are changing, etc. So what are the proposals there? Overall, and generally speaking, if you would continue to pursue your report, I would rather join our efforts. Two of your institutes, by the way, came to our St. Petersburg AI Center. It was MIFI and Gubkin University, and so those two universities came to St. Pete, and then the Bauman universities are following. So there is some kind of like academic research and integration. I am not calling on you to, to do the foresight for the whole country, although as a leading company, you should probably be thinking about that as well. But you should be more or less present in this common technology domain in power engineering and chemistry. Of course, you don't need to finance that fully, but you need to be present. You need to be on the boards of the appropriate forecasting centers. Now, if you take the technologies, there we need to see some new labs being established, and if you have, some proprietary in-house university, we would really be happy to think about some new labs being built with your participation. We may also see some new projects with Gazpromneft. We did what we call an energy hub, which more or less makes it possible for Gazpromneft to collect all those ideas across the world to try to come up with an ecosystem. Frankly speaking, I was thinking that it would be just a formal center, but really the idea was flying, and although I kind of like took part in that myself, but I was not totally convinced that it is going to fly. But it did, and indeed we have some projects afloat, and the benefits for Gazpromneft are quite evident. Well, I'm not sure that we can do the same for the railways, but we may be thinking about establishing some hubs again, and there the benefit and the profit would be there, and for us as well. Well, we all know that our future will really depend broadly on whether the Russian railways can set up a framework for us. And we believe that Russian Railways is a company which, through its efforts, can design an architecture and the future of the economic system of St. Petersburg and all the Baltic area. We would be happy about any of the contribution that your research can make to our programs and projects. I can promise that if you do have some interest in taking part in what is going on in St. Petersburg, we would be happy to welcome you on board, because to us you are a systemic player. Vladimir, thank you for such also a systemic and voluminous approach. Perhaps we can ask our production people to provide some comments on that. What do you see in terms of those new ideas, and what would be the outcome and performance in 10-15 years?
First of all, thank you so much for inviting us to that roundtable. This is pleasure and privilege for us to work with you. We do believe that Russian Railways is a very professional, qualified customer, therefore may promote the technologies which this or that way would be applicable in some future. Speaking about what's been noted from the very outset, if would like to become a technological leader in 50-20 years, already today you have to set certain technological achievements. More and more often we're paying attention to green technologies, thinking of the consequences of the decisions that we take. In that sense, cooperation between Rosnano and Russian Railways can give an impetus to the innovative development, but in compliance with the technological requirements, probably we actually can comply with what Ms. Thunberg is telling us to do and the common sense. What technologies can be most required in the long term or short term? I was told a joke, a story. Two Russians meet and one says, we are running out of oil, what am I going to do? And the other one says, I bought a vehicle, this is one-seat vehicle, it looks like a tank. And it runs on hydrogen. And just I spent one case full of dollars. And the first one says, so you don't have to fill it 10 liters gasoline every day. And the second one asks, where do you get the hydrogen? Well, I got a facility. It costs 2 casefuls of dollars, and I spent just 500 liters to fill it to make hydrogen. So I do think that in the nearest future, probably you won't have to use 500 liters, but rather 450 liters in order to make hydrogen. Probably hydrogen would become less expensive. Let me tell you about other renewables which we are developing along with the Russian railways. Rosnano and Russian railways are discussing the use of renewables for infrastructure, for instance. And it's no wonder, it's no surprise to anyone that electric vehicles are being actively used, but we have integrated with one of Rosnano's subsidiaries, now using some technologies for terminal stations. Windmills are also being used. Rosnano contributed to helping the wind generation come into shape in Russia. We are discussing the use of such fashionable projects in some of some remote places of Russia. Answering your question, what are the promising areas that I can note in the run of 15 to 20 years? The products which could be interesting in that direction, these are the LED lamps. The same is true of composite materials. Although we didn't note any breakthroughs we expected, but probably there are two most important vectors that we will have to pay attention to. That's science of materials and renewables. We can make some pilot projects, and in essence, they will have far-reaching consequences. The effect of their use, I'm confident that our children and our grandchildren will thank us for that, because we will be choosing the clean, environmentally friendly technologies. Thank you so much, Michael. Alexander? We all are familiar with Mr. Andreev's presentation. The challenges are affecting not only the company, but also the manufacturers. What do you think? Whether what Vladimir said is true or not, and do you see any areas for our cooperation? Thank you so much for your question. I'm pleased to see familiar faces, and actually, certainly I didn't see the presentation prior to that session, but that's great that these strategic things which Russian Railways chooses as its priority, such as high-speed trains, digital platforms, digitalization. This is what Mr. Bezerov spoke about yesterday, seamless integration of different services, platforms, and business models. This is the area that Siemens globally defines as its strategy. So we are developing environmentally friendly transport using digital technologies. Many of you probably know that Siemens, for many years, and we take pride in that, is the partner of Russian Railways. We are interacting very closely. Before, we would be just selling some trains to Russian Railways, but now we are cooperating at a totally different level, which could be called with core creation, core ideation. This is the co-working with the Russian and German engineers who are setting up new platforms. Speaking more specifically, we believe in railway transport. This is what Siemens is investing very actively into. And by 2040, the passenger traffic will double due to the rise in the population, due to the use of more active use of the environmentally friendly transport. Yesterday it was said that railways are most environmentally friendly. And certainly, this is due to the urbanization process, which was mentioned by Mr. Belozerov yesterday. More people now are becoming more mobile and aspire to live in cities, but without losing the rural origin. In terms of decarbonization, hydrogen is regarded as an alternative means of power supply, and we have certain achievements there. For instance, we are working along with Deutsche Bahn on setting up a new platform, and it has to be implemented starting from 2024. And now, if you have not visited our booth, I invite you to see that. That's a train, and we showed that to Mr. Belozerov yesterday. It would be very interesting, based on that platform, to see what we could do all together for the Russian market. It can be 2 or 3 car long train, a very compact sized train, which can boast the speed of about 360 kilometers per hour, and we see some future behind that train, so it can be used for satellite towns and cities around Moscow and St. Petersburg, where there is no electric power. Such a train can be a very good alternative for the commuter train or suburban train. We discussed the economic effects of hydrogen in terms of the technology. We see that hydrogen-based transport is rather competitive against the diesel run one, and in terms of the economics, in terms of the operation, we see that it is quite competitive. In terms of capex, this is associated with big costs, but I do think that we have to adopt some strategy, some policy. Once this technology is used on a large scale, certainly capex will go down a little bit. So the scale matters. Speaking about high-speed trains, you all are familiar with Sapsan trains, and they are very much demanded for. The very first train from the third batch was shipped to St. Petersburg, and until December, the commissioning works have to be done, and in 2022, these trains would be put into operation, and we are very glad that despite all the pandemic restrictions and problems with the supply chain, we still managed to stick to our time frame and plans that we discussed 2 years ago with Mr. Belozerov. The future belongs to high-speed trains with a speed of about more than 300 kilometers per hour. We are working all together on creating a revolutionary approach. This is not about localization of the available product in Russia, but this is about creating, under the leadership of the Russian railways, of the Russian train with a Russian-made IP, with the support of Siemens as a Western partner. And we're working on a concept. We are defining the features which have to be typical of that train. This train would be created here in Russia. It would be produced here in Russia at Uralsky Lokomotivy factory. We are focusing on our strategy. Digitalization, certainly. introduces dramatic changes into our business model, and this is true not only of the railways, but if you look at the industrial industry, such as automobile industry, for instance, Volkswagen now is embarking on a platform which includes not only its factories but also the suppliers, and therefore it allows them to streamline the interaction between the supplier, manufacturer, and next stage is to incorporate the customers into that platform. This platform-based work creates new opportunities for interaction and partnerships. We as a company are investing heavily, and it implies M&As. Taking over software companies, developers, introducing certain ticketing software. We are ready to offer our technologies, our developments in order to improve the work of that system, to make Russian railways a top-notch operator in Russia. Thank you so much. As far as I know, we have several online speakers. Mr. Klepich, are you with us? I'm with you. Sounds good. Mr. Klepich, we have already discussed a number of questions. And there are several forks in the road for Russian railways. First of all, we can be a commercial company which maximizes its profits, or it has to address some social and public services. Do we have to diversify our business in order to compensate for the loss of revenues, where we have to focus on transportation? And number three, either we become a leader in the multimodal transportation, probably becoming a monopoly, or we have to focus on transportation services, being supplier for the multimodal companies. So which choice Russian Railways has to make? Looks like we have some technical problems. Unfortunately, internet connection is poor. I lost the second part of your question. First choice is a commercial company, infrastructural company, diversification, and number three is to be a leader in the multimodal transportation market or becoming the supplier for other multimodal platforms. I don't think that Russian Railways can be guided by capitalization and profit making. Anyway, Russian Railways is almost a monopoly as far as it possesses the railway infrastructure. But anyway, economic issues and efficiency, cost efficiency, is something which acquires a lot of importance. A lot would depend not only on the Russian railways, how it optimizes its fleet, its stock, its routes, but it would Russian Railways is an infrastructural company, but its look changes, and at the strategic sessions that Russian Railways held, we spoke about a whole spectrum of logistics services and functions. I don't think that the RZD can become a monopoly there. There are lots of logistics stakeholders, but the RZD, or Russian Railways, can embark on the logistics services beyond railway system. This is what the company can do. In addition, we see RZD offers a wide range media services, and data services, I don't think that the importance of such services would rise. Digitalization not only changes the very nature of the logistics of cargo and passenger transportation, but it adds a new dimension to the business. Now, therefore, it can become a part and parcel of the company's diversification. But I agree with the previous speeches, the ones which I managed to listen to. Really, certain technological revolution is taking place, and the RZD is part of that. This technological process embraces high-speed traffic and unmanned steering of cargo transport. Probably we can set up certain versatile platforms which would help to carry goods using different modes and end-to-end services. This is what RZD embarked on before. This is not just another way to offer services, but this is a total new approach for logistics. This is about technologies. What hydrogen can be in the very heart of the future processes and future, it can become a very serious factor, and therefore we have to start mastering these technologies already today, and the RZD has such projects as far as I understand. This is about new technologies of repairing the tracks, approaches which are being tried and tested in partnership with other companies. Really, railways systems are several centuries old, but now it finds itself on the brink of a technological revolution. Thank you so much. Mr. Klepach, thank you so much. And the second question, you certainly are familiar with the plans of innovative development of the major Russian companies. Are there any major innovative projects or areas where RZD can join the efforts of other companies? Well, hydrogen, along with the concept for hydrogen-based development and sources of hydrogen, this is where RZD can cooperate with the energy companies and Rosnano hydrogen and different sources of hydrogen and fuel cells. This is a topic which requires the efforts of public companies and private ones.
Well, it is well known that RZD signed an agreement with the various communication providers, and there you may use some communications to trace the movement of cargoes, and they also have some cooperation with Rosatom and Roscosmos. And of course, you need to find the niches where you can produce sizable synergy. Again, new alloys, new metals, not only aluminum but also composite materials that can be widely used in car making and aircraft making industries, but later on they may also be used in the railroad industry. Andrei, thank you very much, and I understand that we also have online Boris Lapidus. Is that so? Yes, I'm online, and I think that this is a very important discussion, and this is the result of the work and effort that has been taken in last year on foresight, and this link between the science and producers with the help of RZD is very important, based on the strategic trends and directions, and this is going to be the basis for a more stable future. I believe, and also the basis to hedge those uncertainties that we discussed today. I believe that those uncertainties should definitely be forecasted and should also be mitigated based on the modern models. Because in any case, the forecasts must be longer term. And although we are hampered by those global challenges, but still the forecasts must be long-term, because railroads have a lot of inertia in terms of innovations as well, and also in terms of the payback periods, and in terms of creating new technological products. Now, in this regard, we might want to have new tools that would overcome this conservatism, this inertia. We need to have this accelerated cooperation between science, research, production, and operations. And I believe that RZD may be a stronger incentive for the development of railroad machine building by offering more progressive and promising technological requirements. Of course, any vendor would be able to invest in some new products, provided that investor has some guarantees of the market development. So we need to be thinking about the segments of the market, and it is very important for the science, for managerial initiatives and designs that would also produce a more performance-based future. I believe that RZD, looking forward, should really present itself as a multimodal leader and as the core of the Russian multimodal system. This is due to a well-developed network of railroads, which of course needs to be expanded, but it is also driven by some major innovative and centralized resources that can be quickly employed to create digital platforms, technological interfaces, so that this system of transportation in Russia would be performing better, would be offering better quality and services to the clients. And there, the role of the railway should not be limited to only infrastructural services. Thank you. Boris, thank you very much. Let us move on. Vladimir Nikiforov, acting CEO of ITMO University. Well, Vladimir, you are one of the leaders in terms of digital technologies and software. In your opinion, what could be the contacts between you and the Russian railways, and what are the challenges on this road? Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this panel. I think it is a very interesting one. And indeed, we saw from the previous presentations that RZD is trying to look into the future to identify the priority-based technologies that would be important for tomorrow. And we as a university, we are interested in cooperation, of course, and also we are interested in taking part in some real life developments and development and design that would be instrumental for our future. Of course, for our university, it is of interest to have such cooperation. We already have some quite big common projects, and we are developing and also implementing a system of quantum communications between St. Petersburg and Moscow. We have had some first transmissions of data recently, and by the beginning of next year, we should complete this project. And of course, it is also interesting for us to cooperate in IT, in IT security. And we also heard today that our country and our city are busy with introducing new materials, and this is an area which is also supported and promoted in our university, and this could be another contact point between us. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir. Pavel Morozov, Managing Director of Skolkovo. Pavel, I have two questions for you. First, whether venture investment is possible for the railway projects, and second, what could be the areas of cooperation between you and the RZD? Thank you for being invited here. Just like a few words about venture investment. As part of the Skolkovo Foundation, which is a big institution focused on some startups, but that is one of the investment blocks, and one of the priorities would be to really invite large companies to venture investments. In particular, RZD is one of our partners for that. And answering your question, indeed, this is something that we are doing, because we believe and see in practice, and including we know that from foreign experience, that an integral part of this accelerated development within the environment of high competition would be this interaction with this method of innovations. At the same time, of course, there are some caveats, and we need to. It's not that you just simply establish a venture investment fund and then technologies would come. That is not so. RZD is of the opinion, and we are of the same opinion, that efficiency can be achieved from such venture investment if you have a full ecosystem of working with the startups. And those are the independent private companies that through private investment or through institutional investment would undertake to implement an innovation and make money on that. So there's some commercial interest. And part of this ecosystem is really working with the concept of cultivating an appropriate culture of, introducing and establishing accelerators and incubators. And frankly speaking, most of the Russian companies are lagging behind there from the Western counterparts. There are not really too many instruments and tools to understand how to work with a startup. If, say, you have like a company of, 1,000 people, you may know how to manage that. But with a startup, which is small, those big companies don't know how to deal with those. They prefer really to buy some off-the-shelf solution from Microsoft, but not buy something from a startup. Well, it does not make you a competitive advantage if you buy the same product as your competitor. You would have the same product as everyone else. And the second question here, I'd probably try to take both questions together. The second big block, if you like, is about working with, of course, startups, but also we need to use the M&A mechanism. And the idea is to really set up some JVs with the startups, and the startups would be turning into, say, subsidiaries of RZD. And when the technology is so fundamental that you want to control that and have the IP rights on that. And That would be the priority for the participating companies. And of course, if you take Western experience and of big companies like Deutsche Bahn or other mainstays that can be the counterparts and analogs of RZD, or maybe the whole Russia or Russian industries, there you do see some big steps being made. You already have venture funds in the Russian market with the contributions from state-run corporations like Rosatom and others, and the first startups have been financed. We already have some output of those cooperation schemes, and I hope that within the next 10 years we will be able to catch up and produce a good tool set of such investment. You are saying that all those big companies have quite good regulations to buy the products. RZD, is it also successful there? Well, I think that the question is too broad, and but at the same time too granular to provide a quick answer. We are happy to see that many kind of like people from RZD willing to run such a project. So we do see some first regulations being made that would support the projects. And of course, if a company starts to, I don't know, to work with a company of 15, 20 people with a turnover of maybe 100 million rubles, it is quite difficult for that company to really interest RZD and partner with RZD. You need to have fast tracks. And we don't have those separate and exclusive fast tracks for such startups. However, the first steps have been made there, and that is also a pleasant sign. Well, we need to sum up, more or less. Vladimir, maybe you can sum up. Are you satisfied with what you heard, and do you have anything else to say in conclusion? Well, you are the master of the table, so to say, so you need to decide. Well, are you happy with what you heard, and do you have anything else to share with the panelists and the audience? Well, you know, it is to my great satisfaction what I heard from my colleague, Andreev, and I'm happy with the fact that my beloved city is managed and ruled by such good people as well. So I'm happy for them. I believe that everything is set in order there. Now, we do have many crossroads to make, and it is important not to really lose time and waste time taking various roads. Looking back, we may recall that we were looking at this dynamic exhibition of the engines. We saw the first steam engines, but really it is not a question of, totally forgetting about steam engines, but we need to think about how to produce more, because there is some good demand for such steam engines to be used by tourists, and the demand is high, and we don't have enough of those steam engines to support that demand. So where to find the good technologies and places and locations to produce those? That's a question. Also, I remember that it was for the first time that Siemens said, no, we don't have such a product, and we cannot create that. Which means that we need to develop and, kind of like evolving faster. Look at the world, generally speaking. If today we can more or less manage a cluster of stations from Moscow, but those are like hundreds and thousands of kilometers away. You can manage the eastern area, you can manage the Vostochno-Sibirskaya road and Zabaikalskaya. All of those are in the far east of Russia. That is possible because of the way telecommunications have been developing. But at the same time, the most complex piece of equipment, it was, back in the old days, that was a huge tower that would be transmitting the signals. Now it all comes to chips and to digital, and the reason I mentioned that is that still many of the old technologies are in use. My colleague mentioned startups, but look at this new company of 25 people, and they decided to offer some new type of superstructure or a new engine, but I do not know whether they would be able to do that. We need to understand the difficulty of building a railroad network. The products that we need are very narrow and focused. The locomotives really are slow to evolve, and because the market for such products is quite limited. It's quite limited by the needs of companies, and the companies are trying to push the producers, and they say that we need to move it like this. We need to move to hydrogen, to gas. This is inevitable. This is dictated by the rules of the game, and you need to be moving your production to make it safer, to make it green, and not really totally focus on the hydrogen and gas machines. But you may also think about some other designs and new ideas and change faster and better to follow us. And otherwise, we are going to be replaced by another mode of transportation, not a rail one. But within the rail transportation mode, we do not understand how, say, Chinese can travel at 350 kilometers an hour. We can move even faster, but it is being implemented quite slowly.
Well, actually, Siemens showed a totally new locomotive. And braking system actually now is an issue. Even such giants cannot implement much faster the innovations, but the world tells us you have to change much faster. Offer other products. Well, St. Petersburg transportation system may get a connection between the left and the right bank, and in essence, such technological solutions have been integrated into Lastочка and Subzone. But why there are no other solutions? Because the passengers do not want it. It's not convenient, no conditioner, no toilet, it's too noisy, you have to open the doors manually, the lighting is wrong, so this vehicle is totally inconvenient. The demands of people are now different. People need stable internet connection. This is not the Russian railways which has to do that. The mobile providers have to do that, and they also have their economy to bear in mind. They say that there are just 3 people living there, so we'll not install any transmitters. We are losing connection in the city, but digitalization would stand still without internet connection. What privileges digitalization would give us? I totally agree with the one who says that without any distortion we can get seamlessly the information, so it's no longer just a patchwork of data. Therefore, we can change much faster to accommodate for the requirements of the market, and this is the message which was sent to the market stakeholders. We have to change much faster. This is what we're looking at and what we are implementing together with Alteza. So this is our today's present, but this is already yesterday. We're looking to the future, and everything should be covered by the digitalization with unified management system, where the management and steering centers would be located in Vladivostok and other Siberian cities where locomotives would not consume as much power, and the speeds at which they travel have to be over 400 kilometers per hour, and this would require totally different steering systems and braking systems. If we do not do that, we eventually will run into the following. You look at the table and you have to understand what share you would obtain. What share would belong to the automobiles, to the aircraft. Why they increasing their share? Because they can change much faster. This is what we can do altogether. The company itself, without manufacturers, without supplies, without the customers, without startups, cannot survive. But these are us who are coming to you with our startups, which was set up with a purpose. We understand that if we are not developing the new technologies and new equipment, then manufacturers won't run out of the capacity. We're creating our own engineering centers. We are creating some innovative environments, and we try to create this startup altogether and bring new life into that so that it could look like an innovative cluster. And we are implementing very interesting projects of the future. And therefore, we can look with open eyes into 2050, feeling safe and secure. This is something that we really can do. We succeed in that. The same is true of other things as well. Every such an idea would find its niche. Batteries and 4 kilometers per hour, hydrogen, other solutions in IT, in terms of innovative materials. So, colleagues, this helps us move forward and remain competitive. We have to be proactive. We don't have to remain competitive. We have to leave our competitors behind. Well, the pandemic showed that we are much more sustainable rather than other transportation systems. What happened to air carriers? You see, those who worked sustainably, what worked sustainably in Russia and all over the world, that's the railway systems. We provided for this work, and so it means that we can do that. We are not so vulnerable. The pandemic gave an impetus to all of us and made us very quickly develop these things which we had in terms of the IT systems. These are thousands of people who worked from home, who provided for communication between the consignors and consignees. And this was done at a very big territory. I must say that this situation made us stronger and helped us to look with optimism into the future. We have to develop technologies much faster. Thank you so much, Vladimir. It was great to hear that you are ready to initiate or to provoke innovative development of the industry. Usually, you can hear such enthusiasm from small aggressive startups, but not from a big boss of a major company. I hope that with your efforts and with the input of your partners, this future will come true much faster. Probably it would be a post-modernist future. I do hope that we will use more hydrogen in the fuel cells. That's it. We are done. Let's call it a day. Thank you so much. I do hope that it was very interesting for everyone. Thank you and see you. Bye.